I'll try to stay still, but I get excited when I talk about what Jesus. You know, this is the testimony of Jesus Christ in my life. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my past, but I'll remind you that my past is over, and I've got a new life. And basically, I grew up where I'm working now, back on the estate, and when I was about 12, I started taking drugs. My parents were nearly splitting up. Started just smoking a bit of dope, doing a bit of acid. This was the 60s. Did that for a couple of years. Got to the age of 15. The guy I used to score my dope off didn't have any. I went in town, met a guy, got stoned with him, bought some dope off him. But he had these little white pills called diamorphine hydrochloride, heroin, and he kept pushing them at me, and I didn't like needles at all. But in the end, I was so stoned, I just let him inject me, and I was 15, and it was the beginning of the end of my life, really. Started going down Boots the Chemist every morning. There were in Southampton at that time. There were 4 addicts. Left school at 16, I became addict number 5. Number 364 in this country. I used to, in those days, doctors just prescribed you heroin and cocaine. I went to my doctor when I was 16, showed him all my track marks. He prescribed me heroin and cocaine. That was it. For 10 years, that was my sort of life, going down Boots the Chemist. I used to come up to the dilly. I was, you know, we had a lot of doctors up around the West End of London, £5, £2. You could buy as much. They just write your prescription out for as much heroin and cocaine as you wanted. Pure pharmaceutical, not cut, just pharmaceutical drugs. That's what I was used to. And then the clinics came out in the 70s. They cut my scripts in half. I started breaking in the chemists. Decided I wasn't a good robber, so I actually decided to cut out all the middleman, and I started working with the Chinese in Gerrard Street. And so I was just dealing in half ounces and ounces of heroin. And I never made a penny. Everything went up my arm. Every 2 hours, I needed a fix. Every couple of hours, I needed something so that I'd be normal, so I wasn't sick. That was my life, 365 days a year, no time off for Christmas, no time off for anything. I was trapped. I was a prisoner. And, you know, to be honest with you, I'll tell you, for the first 10 years, I didn't really want to come off anything. I thought I found my answer to I didn't like the world I was living in. It was an escape to me, heroin. It meant, you know, my peers told me that we couldn't change any of the injustices in this world. And I really believed them in the end. You know, I was involved as a really young man when I was 12, 13 with CND, Grosvenor Square, all these things, Vietnam War. I was passionate. Those things like that little girl running down the road set alight by napalm really upset me. And when I found heroin, it shut it all out, wrapped me up in cotton wool. I was comfortably numb, as Pink Floyd say. And, you know, and it was just, this was my life. And then I got busted in the early 70s with half ounce of heroin on Waterloo Station. It was Southampton Drug Squad that busted me. They took me back they gave me the choice, West End Central or Southampton. Well, I didn't want to go to West End Central, and I'd get my head kicked in. So like, I sat on a train all the way down there. The police had never seen heroin like it. They told me I'd been ripped off because they were rocks like that. And I said, okay, let me go then. But it was 80% pure heroin. And then, like, through a court case and a miracle of God, really, you know, I got kicked out of Southampton for 3 years. So I lived in Tooting. I was under a clinic in West Norwood, the only clinic in the country giving heroin prescriptions out. I was the only person in that clinic with all my limbs. Because this is what heroin does to you. You know, I remember I was in Charing Cross Hospital, I had septicemia in this arm, my arm was black right down to my fingertips. And I remember while they were deciding whether they're going to amputate my arm, that it didn't really matter, I could still inject with this hand. That's how good these drugs make you feel. And, you know, I was addicted to barbiturates, diconal. Barbiturates got me sectioned 5 times under the Mental Health Act. 28-day sections in mental hospitals because there was no rehabs in those days, and it was straight in, take your clothes away from you, bang, you know, that's it, and then come back out straight away, back at it again. In Winchester Prison, I went through cold turkey in the hospital wing. 6 days later, I was back out. They gave me bail again, gave me the 6 days prescription that they picked up for me while I was in the padded cells going through cold turkey. You know, and it was just my whole life was just a mess, and my family, everything to me was a bag of smack. The whole thing. My sister told my wife today, you know, recently, she said every time Bob came around the house we had to move everything out. You know, anything of value. To me, it wasn't worth money. It was a £5 bag, a 20 bag. It didn't matter. It was just, that's all it meant to me. It was, money wasn't an issue with me. Money was just a way to what I needed. And it was like, I got married, went through 14 years of marriage, moved all over the country trying to run away from my problem. Everywhere I went, within a day or two, somebody would come up to me in the new town I was living in and say, do you want to score? You know, most of my life I weighed 8 stone. Nearly 16 years ago, when finally I came off of drugs, I weighed 7.5 stone. And that was my weight. By the time I was 21, I'd lost all my teeth. I sort of, you know, I found out in the last 5 years that I had Hep C. And, you know, this was just my life. It was just a never-ending circle. Drug squad parked over the road. Everywhere I went, they followed me, you know? And it's like, and they know, really, you know, it's not long before they're going to get you because, like, you've got a habit. And you've got to feed it. And, you know, the interesting thing, in the 60s, we had this saying up Piccadilly, you know, a minute past midnight, 300 addicts would appear from nowhere. And we would go and pick up our next day's prescription, minute past midnight, so we could pick up the next day's script. All of us would go down the toilet in the tube station, and the sink would be blood red, where everyone's washing their syringes out. And nobody could touch us, because we were legal. We were registered addicts. We were registered under the Home Office. You know, and you think, like, when back then it was 300 odd. I mean, how many today? Yeah, you know, and we're probably, my generation was probably the cause of that. And I actually met guys that actually were before us. People, Canadian fighter pilots, they were on amounts of heroin that could kill all of you in this room. One guy shooting up 6 grains of heroin and 6 grains of cocaine in one hit, enough to wipe out 10 of you. And that was just to stay normal, you know? And these were fighter pilots from the Second World War that actually got fed morphine and everything else, and they got addicted to it. You know? That's the sort of lifestyle I had. And then I moved about all over the country, but like I said, my problem went with me. You can run, but yeah, you can hide. It's there. People suss you out as soon as you walk into any place, what you are, you know? And it's like, and everywhere I went, and the last 10 years I was a heroin addict, I really wanted to come off it. And, you know, for 27 years I was a heroin addict. And every psychiatrist I had told me that I'd never come off it. You know? And I started to believe all these people. You know, you've got to just accept it, Bob. You're always going to be a junkie. You know? You're always going to be a junkie. That was my identity. I was not known for anything else in my life except as being a junkie, and a good one. One that always had drugs, you know? And it was like, that was my life. And I really wanted to crack this. And every time I used to try, I used to think, why can't I change the way I think? Why can't I change the way I think? And people tell you in the world, have willpower, do this. I found willpower just made me fall on my face. You know, and I let people down all the time because they'd say, your family would say, oh, get off it, because if you loved us, you would do it. And they don't understand addiction. It wasn't, you know, I could go into, like, I come out of the padded cells and I was off of it, but I wasn't free. Up here, I was still an addict. I fought like an addict, you know. You need something to come and change all that.